All right, we are recording. So thank you for joining today. This is the Redmond Zoning Code Rewrite Phase 2. I am Kimberly Dietz, a principal planner with economic development and community development and implementation. The rewrite is a periodic update to the city's development regulations. The zoning code is a living document and it does change over time. It needs to meet development standards and legislation, but most importantly, it needs to be consistent with city policy. At its 10th anniversary, and since its last significant update, this project team is looking forward to all of your feedback on the components that we're presenting today. There are 24 components, so as I mentioned, there's a lot of information we're going to share with you today. With this phase 2 and this presentation, this is a kickoff. So what you'll hear today is very preliminary components that are provided so that you can provide us feedback early in the process. The staff team will present the project scopes, will present some milestones, will describe the components at a high level, just to give you enough information to describe if they were to proceed the way that they're currently drafted, what the anticipated outcomes would be. So that helps you give us some feedback. And then we will also review the communication tools that staff is going to provide and maintain throughout the course of the next year so that you can learn how things change, if they change, and how to provide additional feedback. The project timeline for the rewrite as a whole spans over several years. The key thing is that Redmond 2050, which is the city's comprehensive plan update to its policies, and the Redmond zoning code are going together in tandem. Policies need to lead and advise regulations. And as the comprehensive plan is updated through the Redmond 2050 project, the regulations are also going to be updated to reflect that new vision and the goals of the city. Last year, the staff completed phase 1 of this rewrite, and that was to provide a solid foundation for any subsequent updates through about 2026 to then happen. First, we will provide in phase 2 some of the general updates, which involve moving code to have it be more streamlined, some substantive updates, and also we're always trying to address city priorities. So you'll see some of that today. In phase 3, we are looking forward to working on the city's design standards, not only the standards themselves, but also illustrations that will reflect those standards and provide more clarity as development occurs. How is it going to change the fabric of the city? And then finally, in phase 4 of the project, which has not started at all yet, we will look to finalize the major updates that need to happen for consistency with Redmond 2050, but also with the city's functional plans and our strategic plans, such as the Environmental Sustainability Action Plan and the Housing Action Plan. So we look to the comprehensive plan first, and that's where we define the goals that this project must meet. We also look to the community strategic plan. And in doing so, what we have identified as the overarching goals for this project are to streamline the code, make it as clear and concise as possible, to address any needed priorities that the city identifies in its budget or in the biennial community strategic plan. So every 2 years, we have an opportunity to look at those needs. And then also, as we go forward with updating the code, we want to make certain that we are not creating additional errors or inconsistencies. So we're marching along in a slow manner so that we make sure that we don't inadvertently break the things that we are trying to repair. And as I mentioned on the previous slide, we are addressing priorities such as the Climate Emergency Declaration, Environmental Sustainability Action Plan, and the Housing Action Plan. Now here you can see the project timeline for this phase only. And because code is very, very technical and very specific, staff has worked over the last year in order to develop the preliminary conceptual drafts that we'll present today. This may seem like a large amount of time, but if you change one part of code, there are likely 5 to 10, if not more parts of the code that also need to be updated. So that's what I mentioned about trying to avoid breaking the code. So staff has been very diligent in their work, and we've also tested out some of the drafts. We've also checked with leadership, and we've communicated internally to make sure that as the code change for the staff that are implementing the code, that it's creating a better scenario for their review, but also by doing so, a better scenario for the developers to build the city that is defined in our comprehensive plan. Now, going forward, the whole month of August is when we are reaching out to you. So starting today and going through the end of the month, we want to hear your thoughts on these preliminary concepts. Then, after you give us your feedback, staff will go back to the drawing table. We will refine the amendments to meet the needs that were identified by your feedback. We will check in with our project leadership and our technical teams to make sure that we're still avoiding breaking the code and making a better scenario. And then we will bring it back to you. So before we start what is called formal review, there will be another opportunity for you to dig a little bit deeper into the code, test some scenarios with the staff team, and give us your feedback. Once we pass that milestone, the code will move into formal review. And formal review involves a checklist in which we analyze the environmental conditions that would be created by this code change. We work with the city's technical committee, and then we also work with the planning commission and the city council to receive their review, and also for the planning commission to hold a public hearing. So this, like I mentioned, is the first opportunity to provide us feedback on this draft. So now let's jump into the components. And I want to remind you, we do have a project webpage that is available for you to follow along throughout the next year. And we also have a Let's Connect page. I'll speak to that a little bit more in detail. But before we talk about any changes to code itself, let's hear from Becky Fry, who is the lead for the Redmond 2050 Comprehensive Plan update.
Thank you, Kim. I am Becky Fry. I'm the principal planner for the Long Range Planning Division. I am one of the project managers for Redmond 2050, but I am tasked with coordinating with Kim on all the code related updates that are coming out of Redmond 2050. Don't try to read this slide. I just wanted to have it in there so that as you get this, you can come back to it and read through it. But as you can see, there are a number of updates to the Redmond zoning code and a few to the Redmond municipal code that are going to be a part of implementation of the Redmond 2050. So the first phase of those is only what is on this slide. Phase 2 is to come. And these are the updates that we anticipate will be adopted next year. And so I've listed our website, redmond.gov/Redmond 2050, but also a link directly to a page that we created specifically for tracking the code related updates. The bulk of the code updates coming out of phase 1 are going to be related to Overlake, and I'll talk about that a little bit more here in a second, and transportation, especially a lot of the parking related code is being updated. Kim, if you can jump to the next slide. One of the biggest things that I'm working on with my team is overhauling the code for Overlake. In addition to an expansion of the center boundary, we're doing a lot of zoning district updates, including consolidating Overlake Village 1 through 5 zoning districts into one, creating a new zoning district, implementing a number of different development standard updates, including establishing a transit-oriented development focus area. We're completely repealing and replacing RZC's 2112. There's going to be a completely new incentive package, a new planned action, and we're establishing an international district in Overlake. So we encourage you to follow along. And if you haven't signed up to ours, we do have a separate email list for the Redmond 2050 work, but the email list that Kim is managing for code updates will include information about all the code updates that we're doing as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Becky. So here are the 24 code components. These are the topics where you will see updates being provided for your feedback and ultimately to be proposed to our city council. This is a new approach compared to what we used last year. Last year, we led with the code titles and sections, and we tried to focus at that particular level, chapters and sections of the code. However, this year, because there are many, and we want to make sure that the project is clear so that you can give feedback, we are leading with topics. So you see them organized here in 6 groups of topics, and then within each one, there are individual components, for example, cost of doing business or high capacity transit corridors. This is hopefully an easier way than looking at code chapter titles so that you can give feedback on what is important to you. And within each one of these, what you will ultimately see is that they relate to several sections of the code. Um, so if you are, say, for example, looking at residential types, that is one that is going to relate to every single zoning district in the city and therefore will also relate to over 50 chapters within the code. So in order to provide you the story of what the amendments are going to provide, we have an overview page, and then we also have the code pages. So you can look at all of that material combined, but we hope that you'll glance at the overview page in order to get a general idea as to what the proposals are. So the first proposal is format organization, transparency, and accessibility. Now this one is really just looking at how the code works, its functionality, the standardization of the code, and making sure that wording, terminology is clear and concise, grammar is used in a consistent way. So in that way, people who are new to the code in its implementation, or even staff that are new to the code in administering it, will have a consistent experience. And we hope by doing this that the code becomes more accessible to all people, and it also produces the type of product that was anticipated. Landscaping and open space is something that also goes hand in hand with the formatting and structure. So Cameron Zapata is going to tell you more about this one.
Good afternoon. My name is Cameron Zapata. I'm a senior planner. And so for open space and landscaping, some of the more substantial changes to these sections include going from our current organization of specific codes being buried within different sections in our code, which make it harder to find these specific code citations, and proposing a more consolidated open space and landscaping chapters, so it's more of a one-stop shop. The current open space also includes many different types of open spaces, so we've proposed to condense these terms to further align with our park plan. And this leads to a more consolidated and easy to navigate code. Consolidating and clarifying the terminology for these different types of open spaces provides more clarity and predictability for both the applicant as well as the reviewer. Oh, this one is me as well. This is for residential typologies, which is a continuation from phase 1 of the zoning code rewrite. And so some of the more substantial changes include addressing the diversity, equity, inclusion for the residential types, where the current language includes or it creates barriers to affordable housing. Our proposal is to remove some of this language. An example of this includes removing the language which prohibits attached dwelling units in the North Redmond wedge subarea. Live work units are currently not specifically addressed, and so these amendments would include specific code for live work units. And then lastly is residential suites, where the code addresses it through the zone's specific development standards table, but there's no other specific code. And so these amendments would add specificity to the code for the residential suites. So overall, these amendments, they'll provide clarity for review staff and the applicant, and then we'll streamline the process for a quicker review, and also creates opportunity for wider varieties of housing in Redmond.
Hello, my name is Ian Lefcourt, Senior Planner with the Long Range Planning Division, and I am the lead for this Housing Action Plan priority item. The policy direction for this item is Housing Action Plan Action 1.2 and Comprehensive Plan Policy HO49. This item would add code criteria to impact fee exemptions for affordable housing units. At this time, the zoning code refers to a reserved section of the municipal code without any criteria for those exemptions. Because there are no criteria, affordable housing units cannot access the exemptions. The proposed criteria allows percentages of impact fee exemptions up to 100% based on the level of affordability. The more affordable the unit, the greater the exemption. The goal is to incentivize developers to produce affordable units at deeper levels of affordability.
The next component is art, public art. This component is actually led by Chris Weber. He is unavailable today, so I am presenting on his behalf. I'm also a team member with him, so I'm very familiar. Public art is something that has been defined in the code for many years, and it has been a tool that's used to mitigate large blank walls. And recently, it has also been a tool that allows for incentives to occur in certain neighborhoods. Without the definition, however, public art has been unclear as to how it should be implemented and who should review it. So this particular component is going to introduce a definition for public art. It is going to provide a new public art chapter, and it's also going to provide the authority and a process that allows the Redmond Arts and Culture Commission to review proposals for including art. The change actually represents a 2017 system through which art has been reviewed by the Arts and Culture Commission. That was approved by council, though it was not incorporated into the code itself. And so this code would reflect those provisions that have already been used since 2017.
Hi there, my name is Jeff Churchill. I'm the Long Range Planning Manager, and I have 7 slides to share with you about transportation. All of these are aimed at meeting transportation policy goals that are either in the existing comprehensive plan or that are part of Redmond 2050. The first of these is the High Capacity Transit Corridor Preservation chapter of the Redmond Zoning Code. The purpose of this chapter is to ensure that buildings are not built where they would conflict with the light rail alignment in Redmond. But as the light rail is now under construction all the way to downtown Redmond, this chapter is no longer needed. And so the proposal is to repeal it. Could the next slide, Kim? Thank you. Now there are a few slides about parking. This first one is about off-street parking requirements. And the proposal is to change the off-street parking requirements in centers and near frequent transit, mainly to reduce them or to eliminate them, depending on the use and depending on the location. The proposal would improve the transportation system's sustainability, especially in downtown and Marymore Village. It would protect the city's drinking water supply. It would also increase opportunities for housing and especially affordable housing, and also opportunities for jobs and other amenities. The next slide, Kim. So other things related to parking. On-street paid parking is not currently authorized in the code, and the proposal is to authorize it. Doesn't mean it would immediately occur, but it would provide that ability. In addition, currently there are no regulations on compact stalls and how they're distributed in mixed-use developments. Proposals to regulate the distribution of those in mixed-use developments, and so that compact stalls aren't all distributed or aren't mostly distributed to the retail side of mixed-use developments. The thinking being that people who live in these buildings are really more familiar with the layouts of the garages and more able to use those compact stalls. People who are visiting are more likely to have trouble getting in and out of stalls given unfamiliarity, and so having fewer of those stalls devoted to the retail section might improve customer satisfaction and reduce issues in the future. There is currently a code provision for in lieu parking fees. The idea being that the city would be collecting money for a public parking structure. That is, repealing that would bring the code into line with actual practice, which is that this part of the code is not being used and the city is not actively considering a public parking structure beyond any surface lots that already exist. Long-term bicycle parking is currently required within 750 feet of non-residential sites if it's off-site parking. Changing it to 600 feet would actually make it the same as vehicle, the maximum vehicle parking distance, bring parity there. And then with on-street parking permits, right now anyone can purchase an on-street parking permit as long as there's a permit to be purchased. The proposal is to prohibit those who are occupying buildings that have parking that decline to use that parking, decline to lease it or otherwise use it, that they would be ineligible to purchase on-street permits. The idea being, not have people declining parking in their buildings only to purchase an on-street permit later. So make sure that the in-building parking gets used first. Go to the next slide. All right, so together, the proposals are intended to improve access to business, incentivize non-motorized travel, and improve the attractiveness of bicycle travel. Next slide. All right, speaking of bicycles and pedestrians and transit facilities, there are several provisions related to those. The first one is just updating references to plans. That's fairly simple. Just getting the names of the plans into the code. With respect to temporary sidewalk closures, right now the code just requires that a detour be safe. The proposal is that it be safe, continuous, and convenient. Right now, sidewalk width, there's a basic minimum for 5 feet. We'd like to clarify that 5 feet needs to be unobstructed. Sidewalk is certainly wider than 5 feet, but at least 5 unobstructed feet for people to walk, especially as we have more use of the sidewalk. Transit stops and shelters, right now the code says that they should be provided by new development wherever there's going to be demand that supports transit use, but there's not really any guidance about what that means. So the proposal is to actually require that where transit is planned as shown in the Transportation Master Plan, which will mirror Metro Connects and some transit long-range plans. So getting those transit facilities on the route, on the corridors where transit's going to be. Okay, and a few more on these. Right now there is an ability to allow deviations from the minimum sidewalk width if there's a lack of right-of-way. The proposal is to disallow that deviation. The idea is to make sure that any sidewalk that gets built is going to meet the basic minimum standard. And then for most large developments in Redmond, there are what are called transportation management programs. These are agreements between the city and the developer or the manager to offer incentives to people occupying the building to reduce the number of car trips. Right now, there's a requirement for an incentive that has the equivalent value of 25% of a transit pass. The proposal is to increase that to 100% of transit pass. And then also, just to call out parking cash out as one of the options. And parking cash out just means being paid not to park at your building. So taken together, these proposals would align regulations with what's in the draft Redmond 2050 transportation policies, strengthen incentives and requirements related to the provision and maintenance of pedestrian, bicycle, and transit facilities so that people can walk, bike, and use transit more easily. And also incentivize walking bicycling, and using transit. Okay, let's see if I have any more. I haven't been counting to 7. Okay, this might be the last one. There is one figure in the code that is an illustration of how to provide access, and the proposal is to move it to the transportation master plan, and then also considering updating it, because the figure looks like a plat, like a regular suburban single family development, and that's not a lot of what gets built in Redmond today. So just updating it to be more reflective of what's getting built. I believe those are all the transportation slides.
Thank you, Jeff. Economic development is the next grouping, and I am Kim Dietz again. This first of the economic development package is to address special regulations that limit the square footage in the regional retail zone. Presently, those types of businesses that would be retail and large warehouse style retail, they would be limited to 75,000 square feet of floor area or more. They could not be smaller than that. So the proposal is to lift that restriction to allow greater flexibility for businesses. Adaptive reuse is a way that existing buildings can be reused through tenant improvements and modifications while still maintaining what has already been constructed. And this will be encouraged in the area. And recreational uses are currently limited only to adult uses, adult-oriented uses. Instead, the proposal would allow all recreational uses to be located in this particular neighborhood, the regional retail district. Greater flexibility would be achieved through the proposals. That is the intent. And it would also allow businesses to co-locate, which is something that we are seeing as a market interest in today's climate. And it would also make sure to emphasize that adaptive reuse through a variety of code provisions that allow a little bit more flexibility when adaptive reuse is being provided. The addition of the recreational uses is an example of one of the co-located uses that we have heard in the past, where an existing business would reduce their footprint and allow the remaining use to be a recreational use, such as a gym. So this is an effort to improve the flexibility within the zone. The next is also in the Southeast Redmond neighborhood, further east than regional retail. It addresses the NDD2 or Northeast Design District number 2. It involves a setback that is currently 250 feet from the NDD1 zoning district to its south. It allows for a transition of land use from residential in the south closer to Redmond Way, and then transferring and transitioning to industrial in the north along Union Hill Road. And to do that, there are setbacks that are currently listed in the code. Using a master plan is another way of meeting the intent of the zone. And if the applicant were to propose a treatment in the master plan, for example, using an outdoor recreational plaza with landscaping in that setback zone, that would also be meeting the intent. So we want to provide that additional flexibility within this zone. Another portion of this component that staff is monitoring is House Bill 1331 involving daycare uses. And though there are no amendments in the proposal today, we are continuing to monitor this and try to understand how it relates to local code a little bit more. And if there are amendments that come as a result of that, we will provide them to you in the next package before the rewrite goes into formal review. And we will point those out so you are certain to know which of the amendments are related to House Bill 1331. Okay, the next slide is by Jenny Liebeck. Jenny, if you are available.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, I am Jenny Liebach, the Sustainability Program Manager at the city. And so this component represents a complete rewrite of the Green Building Incentive Program, which is intended to, as the name implies, encourage green building practices. So we're updating this component to align with the goals of the city's Environmental Sustainability Action Plan, including decarbonization of buildings, and also incentivizing developers to construct highly efficient buildings that go beyond the state energy code requirements. And so, as I mentioned, this is a complete rewrite, but just a few of the proposed changes include establishing minimum requirements for program participation, including compliance with the State Clean Buildings Act, stormwater infiltration, 100% electric buildings, and a green building certification from one of the approved third-party programs that's referenced. We've also transitioned away from a menu of possible actions and are now relying on third-party programs to outline those specific strategies. And so we hope that these changes will expedite progress towards the city's goals while also streamlining the program for staff and developers.
Hello, my name is Micah Bonkowski. I'm the Solid Waste and Sustainability Program Administrator, and I'm standing in today for Eberly Berrigan until her return at the end of the month. She was the lead on drafting this item. The proposed change would create a new chapter titled Solid Waste Storage and Collection. The proposed changes to the solid waste enclosure requirements are needed because currently requirements only apply to outdoor waste enclosures, and with the increase in denser mixed-use buildings, more waste is being stored indoors. Requirements will address typical challenges to solid waste storage. They'll ensure resident and staff access, safe servicing by the hauler, and they'll adjust the calculations of site requirements based on predicted volume of solid waste by use. This will include updated clear guidelines for developers and more flexibility for developers in determining their on-site storage of solid waste. For example, if they use compactors, they don't have to have quite as much capacity because it's being densified. In addition, inside storage has created issues with temporary container staging for service that the new code will address. For example, it'll list prohibited location types. Some of the issues that we've run into include containers in the right-of-way, blocked parking, and blocked pedestrian facilities, as well as staging of containers over storm drains. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Jessica Atlaxon, and I am an environmental scientist with the city. So these code amendments that you see before you support the policy recommendations from the Temporary Construction Dewatering Policy Analysis Project, which was approved by City Council in December of 2021. So the first proposal here is to amend Redmond Zoning Code 2110-130 so that development that uses dewatering to construct subterranean parking does not qualify for the density bonus. So this basically ensures that the city is not incentivizing dewatering within the critical aquifer recharge area, and that area provides 40% of Redmond's drinking water. The second proposal is to modify the downtown restaurant parking waiver to expand the distance requirements from 100 feet to a quarter mile and to add frequent transit into the criteria list. Additionally, we're proposing to expand this waiver to Marymore to help reduce the need for dewatering within the critical aquifer recharge area. Thank you.
The last amendment package involves the annual code cleanup. And this is something that you will see on an annual basis, whether we are doing a rewrite to the code or not. So we are combining the rewrite and the cleanup this year. There are 6 items that have been proposed as minor cleanups to the code. You can see them listed here. One of them, beekeeping, is an example of an amendment that was requested by the community. And so this is an opportunity for those that identify an issue within the code to let staff know that there is a need or an interest. And as the annual code cleanup or a code rewrite like we are in today is coming ready, we are able to consider those amendments as well. This one is basically, the whole package is basically an opportunity to improve the accuracy and clarity of the code, but also to reflect updated standards. For example, tree wells is an updated standard versus using tree grates. Tree wells is now the new standard that is included in the city and new development. Fences is also another example of an update for consistency, in which case the city's building code and the international building code allows for higher fences. However, the code is not going to identify when a building permit is needed. There are many opportunities in the code when building permits would be needed, and this was what we see as an anomaly, that it was referring to the building code. There are also some general improvements that are going to be included to include or to improve formatting and also to improve the clarity of cross-references. So you can see those all listed here. So now, how do you review and provide us feedback? So there are several ways that we are making available, and we hope that through the variety of these will meet your needs for accessibility to the information, but also for efficiency and timeliness. So we want to meet you where you are, and if that involves listening to audio while you're commuting or sitting at your desk on a weekend and looking through the information, we want to make sure it's accessible to you. So Let's Connect is one of the tools that we are using, and you've seen this used by a lot of city programs as well as surveying. For example, follow up to Derby Day. So Let's Connect allows you to review the information and provide a specific feedback. We are doing this through a forum, so you can type in the comments, make notes in the field, and just share your information with us. That's one way. Another, of course, is that you can always communicate directly with the lead for the component where you have feedback, or with myself, Kim Dietz, if you have feedback on a variety of components, and then I can work with that particular lead. The next is on our webpage, but also in Let's Connect. You're going to see something we're calling the project portal. The project portal, again, is reflecting those groupings of topics and then reflecting the topics themselves. It involves a link to the topic or the component overview so that you can learn, what was the rationale for making this amendment? What type of policy is providing it direction? And what was the research that staff did? What comparisons were done in order to make the proposal as it's being presented? And then in the right-hand column on each of these 3 pages I'm showing here, you can see that there are several code sections where those changes would be reflected. Some more than others. The first example is where we're improving the organization of the code. So there were many opportunities, but then you can see in the examples below that in some cases there's only 2 or 3 sections. So we hope that you'll start with the overview page, learn a little bit about the component, and then look at the code sections. As far as next steps, during the month of August, when you'll be providing feedback, there are a few more opportunities to meet with staff. There is one additional virtual presentation rather, and there are 2 outside office hours. We are holding the office hours on the front entrance to City Hall on the outside area so that it's more easily accessible and safe in the current environment. We are also providing AV cast, so similar to a podcast, but we're using audio visual so that you can look at individual components and hear a longer story than what you heard today from each of the leads for those components. And then during the remainder of 2022, I mentioned earlier, staff will check back with city leadership on any significant changes that are proposed to any of the components. We will refine the amendments to reflect those changes, and then we will hold what we call a testing event and more office hours so that you can stay in touch with each of these components as they move toward the formal review process. Then In the first quarter of 2023, we are anticipating that we will provide a SEPA checklist so you can see the analysis of the entire package. We will also be meeting with the city's technical committee. They will provide a recommendation of the amendments to the Planning Commission, who will hold a public hearing and provide their recommendation to the City Council. So there are many opportunities, including the public hearing, when you can provide feedback to staff. So with that, we're going to open up the presentation for questions and answers, and staff will turn on their cameras so that you can share your questions with the individual component leads. So if you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand. Well, I'm not hearing any questions. Is there any additional information that you, oh, Sue, you have one? I think you're muted.
Unmuted now. Can you provide a few more examples of just adult recreational use and how it will be altered?
Oh, yes. That was an interesting land use many, many years ago. I've been with the city for 26 years, and I think that was last updated in, oh gosh, it may have been 25 years ago. Adult uses are those types of uses that it cannot be prohibited from taking place in a city. However, you can specify certain locations within your zoning districts or your land use where that type of use would be permitted. It falls into our recreational category. So it's an interesting hybrid of land use where it seems like it's retail, but a restaurant, it might be dancing, it might be a club. So it is placed in the recreational category of uses, but it's the only one that is currently allowed in the recreational or the the regional retail zoning district, and that would be where 520 and the off ramp that becomes Avondale near Target and Kohl's and Fred Meyer, that area that we're talking about. So the proposal is to no longer limit the recreational uses only to those adult-oriented uses. It would allow any of the uses that fall into the recreational category to occur within that zone. And that can range from a private business, say that they're providing hoops. You know, you go in there and you practice throwing hoops. That's all they provide. So that's a recreational use. It might be a public use, such as a park or a small community center. It could be a swim center. So there's a variety of uses now that would be allowed if the proposal proceeds as it is today.
Okay, I guess I'm still maybe a little bit confused, but let me dwell on it and I'll get back to you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are there any other questions or more information that staff can provide today? Okay, well, oh, I see one more. Karen, yes.
Okay, so when I first lived in Redmond back in the 80s, early 80s, there was an issue about adult entertainment that was different than the one you're giving for adult entertainment. And I wonder if, you know, how is that covered in this new plan?
There would actually be no changes to the adult entertainment. It is currently allowed, I believe, only in the regional retail district. So there are no changes proposed to that type of use and where it would be allowed. It just happens to be in that particular zone. We want to allow more opportunities for recreational uses. And so we're just calling out that currently today it's limited to that use only. So there would be no changes to allow adult-oriented uses to be in other portions of the city.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay.
Also,
Oh,
I want,
yes.
I also want to ask, how do I sign up to get on this all the time?
Karen, I have your email. You sent an email to me today, and what I'll do when this event is over today is I will include you in the project stakeholders list. So you will receive monthly emails through what we call Gov Delivery, and you will also receive a direct email from me when a significant milestone is coming. For example, like a public hearing, you'll receive that in your email as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And if I can do that for all of those that are attending from the community today, I can make sure that you are already part of the stakeholders list. And if you are not, then I'll check with you directly and ask if you would like to be part of that list going forward. Okay. Are there any other questions of the staff team today?
No, but I'd thank you very much for a great presentation. So thank you.
Thank you. And Sue?
Can you save me a trip on the internet and tell me what House Bill 1331 really says?
Yes, House Bill 1331 had several components in it, and the one that we are trying to understand a little bit more involves when daycare services are provided to those who have financial limitations, and it's a specific provision that the daycare would provide, then the city's impact fees are also reduced.
Ah, all right.
hmm
So it
So
has
it's like affordable daycare.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. All right. Well, if there are no other questions today, I want to thank you all for being here and listening to our lengthy presentation. If you have any questions, please reach out to me and to any of the staff members that you heard from today. We do look forward to your thoughts. If you have any challenges as you're going through the review process, please let me know. I can provide the information in a variety of ways to make it easier for you to review. And I look forward to staying in touch with you and helping you review all of our material. So thank you.